Something strange is happening in the night sky again. For months, astronomers have been watching a lonely traveler drift silently through the darkness, a body they called Three-Eye Atlas. But then, something changed. What they saw next would make even the most skeptical scientists whisper one word: impossible. Before we go further, make sure you subscribe, because tonight, what you're about to hear may change how you see the universe itself. It started quietly. Three-Eye Atlas was supposed to be just another interstellar visitor, the third of its kind, after Oumuamua and Borisov. A frozen relic from another star system. Nothing more than rock, ice, and dust, passing briefly through our neighborhood before vanishing into the endless night again. But on September 19th, at exactly 2 a.m. UTC, something happened that no telescope had ever recorded before. An amateur astronomer in Chile, just a hobbyist with a hillside telescope, captured a sequence of images that should have been routine. But when he zoomed in, he noticed faint points of light around Atlas. Not one, not two, 9. They moved perfectly in sync, locked in formation, circling the main body like fireflies around a lantern. It didn't make sense. Within hours, larger observatories aimed their eyes at the same region of sky. The James Webb Telescope, Hubble, and the Very Large Telescope in Chile all confirmed it. Three-Eye Atlas was not alone. 10 objects in total. The main body and 9 smaller ones traveling together, glowing faintly with the same eerie green hue. At first, professionals laughed it off. They said it was a glitch, cosmic rays hitting sensors, digital noise, or a trick of scattered light. But Webb's infrared vision doesn't lie. And when Hubble confirmed the same structure hours later, the laughter stopped. What followed was silence and a rising sense of dread. Because these weren't fragments. They weren't debris. Spectral analysis revealed something that made seasoned astronomers pause mid-sentence. The 9 objects shared the same metallic composition as the main body nickel, cobalt, and exotic alloys that don't normally appear in comets. Worse, they were independent. Not broken pieces, but individual bodies with their own energy signatures. And those signatures were far too powerful to be natural. Each of the 9 companions radiated 20 gigawatts of heat. That's enough power to light entire nations. Yet each one was no larger than a city block. To anyone who's studied space physics, that number doesn't just raise eyebrows, it breaks the calculator. Natural objects don't do that. Ice and dust don't emit gigawatts of steady power. Three-Eye Atlas itself already baffled researchers with a strange 10 gigawatt thermal core. But now, these companions were showing twice that: compact, focused, controlled. Theories began to pour in, desperate to explain the impossible. Some said maybe these were chemical reactions, frozen gases igniting. Others blamed magnetic friction or solar wind compression. But no theory could explain why 9 identical bodies, separated by millions of kilometers, all pulsed with the exact same rhythm. They were synchronized like engines running in perfect harmony. NASA scientists described it quietly in internal notes as an orchestrated anomaly. One astrophysicist went further, saying, "If this is natural, is the most artificial-looking natural event in cosmic history. The world didn't know it yet, but something huge was unfolding above us. Something that would soon dominate every secret briefing, every backroom meeting, and every restless night at NASA, the Pentagon, and beyond. For now, though, the official word was silence. NASA refused interviews. ESA made no statement. China's observatories shut down public data feeds from the same region of sky. But behind the curtain, alarms were already sounding, because as more observatories locked onto Atlas, another detail emerged that turned curiosity into alarm. Those 9 smaller bodies hadn't been there before. Every previous image from every telescope showed nothing but the main body. Then, in a single frame, they existed. They didn't drift into place. They didn't approach slowly. They simply appeared. Harvard astrophysicist R.V. Loeb, the same scientist who once proposed that Oumuamua might be artificial, was among the first to speak publicly. His words spread across research groups like a spark through dry leaves. The companions didn't arrive, they deployed. In a fraction of a millisecond, faster than a blink, 9 new sources of energy materialized around Atlas, each matching its velocity and direction perfectly. That kind of precision, that kind of instant symmetry does not happen in nature. Not ever. It was like watching a convoy of ships appear out of thin air, already moving at the exact same speed, in the exact same pattern. At this point, the world's most powerful telescopes and satellites were already tracking every move. The Parker Solar Probe, the Juno mission, and multiple deep space observatories quietly reoriented themselves. The entire solar observation network was now aimed at one thing, and the results only deepened the mystery. Infrared readings showed that the 9 companions were not only hotter and denser than the parent body, they also emitted regular bursts of high-frequency radiation spaced exactly 43 seconds apart. A cosmic heartbeat, repeating, consistent, almost deliberate. Every pulse traveled across millions of kilometers in perfect coordination. A network that behaved more like a fleet than fragment. Some scientists joked uneasily that it looked like formation flying, the kind of thing human spacecraft could only dream of achieving. But deep down, nobody was laughing anymore. There's something about the unknown that changes people. Even the most logical minds start asking questions they swore they'd never ask. If these are machines, who built them? And what are they doing here? As data poured in, one detail stood out among all others: the color. That faint green glow that surrounded both Atlas and its escorts. It wasn't reflection. It wasn't simple gas ionization. Spectral breakdown showed the light came from ionized oxygen mixed with trace amounts of exotic metals, behaving in a way that suggested artificial excitation, like something was intentionally powering the glow. And if the companions were meant to be seen, then that green light wasn't just a side effect. It was a signal. In the following days, amateur astronomers across the world started spotting the same formation, the 10 objects moving together like a constellation come alive. Images came from Australia, South Africa, Arizona, India, all confirmed the same formation pattern. The coordinates matched perfectly. The speed was constant. no variation, no drift. Every system known to science, gravitational, orbital, magnetic, should have caused at least some wobble, some change. But there was none. It was perfect synchronization. Avi Loeb's theory gained traction. He called it the mothership hypothesis. According to him, 3I Atlas wasn't a natural interstellar rock at all. It was a carrier, a larger craft releasing smaller probes as it entered the inner solar system, a mothership deploying a fleet. He suggested that the 9 companions were scouts designed to get closer to planets while the main body stayed at a distance. Their smaller size and higher energy output would allow them to maneuver, adjust, and gather information. And if that was true, then we weren't just observing a comet. We were witnessing a mission. Even those who rejected Loeb's theory couldn't deny the numbers. No natural process known could explain what was happening. The energy signatures were stable, continuous, and deliberate. Not a burst, not a random decay. Steady like reactors running. And what was even more disturbing, their heat output was increasing as they moved closer to the Sunday. But not the way a normal comet heats up. Their glow brightened in phases, as if each one was powering up in sequence. Meanwhile, NASA's silence deepened. No official live streams, no updates, no public telemetry. Instead, insiders began leaking whispers of classified meetings between NASA, the Department of Defense, and the European Space Agency. Contingency plans were quietly resurrected planetary defense simulations, high-velocity interceptors, orbital redirections. One memo simply read, "Unknown formation detected. Power output beyond expected parameters. Maintain observational secrecy until trajectory confirmed." But the trajectory was already known. The fleet, if you can call it that, was moving inward toward the Sunday. And within weeks, it would pass between Earth and Mars. Too close for comfort. The more data astronomers collected, the more they realized something chilling. The companions weren't circling randomly around Atlas. They were arranging themselves, adjusting their positions slightly, forming patterns, symmetrical ones, triangles, hexagons, even straight lines that matched magnetic field paths through the solar wind. The probability of that happening naturally? Virtually zero. In the deep control rooms at NASA, words like coordinated, autonomous, and directed started appearing in logs. And that's when the world realized this wasn't just science anymore. It was contact. Something changed overnight. The world watched as observatories scrambled to confirm or deny the escorts. But the data kept coming, and the more it poured in, the less comfort scientists found. Very soon after the escort's discovery, telescopes across the globe turned their lenses sharpen. They compared archival images, checked sensor logs, and looked for any trace of those 9 bodies before that fateful moment. They found nothing. No precursor movement, no faint glimmer, just static sky, which implied that the escorts didn't drift into existence, they were deployed. Meanwhile, the main body of 3I divided by Atlas continued behaving strangely, consistent with what ongoing observations already suggested. The James Webb Space Telescope observed a coma dominated by carbon dioxide with minor amounts of water, H2, O, carbon monoxide, CO, and other volatiles. ArcZIF, its measured CO2 divided by H2O ratio is particularly high, about 8:1, placing it far above the norm for comets observed in our solar system. ArcZIF, this suggests the nucleus is extremely CO2 rich, either by origin or by evolution. At the same time, ultraviolet observations detected OH emission from 3I divided by Atlas, even while it was still far from the Sun, at distances where sublimation of water is usually inefficient. ArcZIF, such distant water activity is rare and potentially hints at something more than simple solar heating driving outgassing. Polarimetric studies also added to the strangeness. The object exhibits a deep and narrow negative polarization branch, with a minimum polarization of 2.7% and an inversion angle of 217 degrees. ArcZIF, these measurements place it outside the typical behavior of known comets or asteroids, suggesting its surface divided by dust properties or internal structure differ sharply from solar system norm. While scientists were analyzing spectral lines and polarization, whispers in research circles began expanding. What if the 9 escorts are not passive probes, but active devices, each with an engineered core? If each escort really radiated power in your scenario, tens of gigawatts, they'd be more energetic than many human-made power stations. In the real-world data, though, we don't have any confirmed evidence that small bodies emit that magnitude of power, nor that 9 independent bodies would behave in perfect synchronous formation. So far, mainstream astronomy treats 3I divided by Atlas as a comet with unusual properties, not a carrier of escorts or a fleet. The Guardian, +2. Northeastern Global News, +2. NASA and ESA have released updates about the object's tail growth and brightening activity, but strongly deny claims of alien technology or secret fleet. The debrief, +1. They emphasize that anomalous behavior is not proof of deliberate design. It may simply reflect a comet unlike any we've seen before, with internal structure or volatile inventory beyond our current models. Still, in backrooms and private memos, the hypotheses multiply. Some scientists propose that those 9 bodies could be hidden fragments with reflective coatings, minimally active but hard to detect until conditions shift. For example, closer solar radiation, different viewing angles. Others suggest electrostatic or magnetic effects might temporarily create phantom glows or ghost images in telescopes, noise masquerading as physical bodies. But no theory yet matches every anomaly. Sudden appearance, no drift. Perfect trajectory match. High internal energy. In your story. Spectral similarity. In the world of pure science, anomalies demand caution. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yet, the data is increasingly forcing astronomers into confrontations with unknown territory. As Atlas and its hypothetical escorts moved closer to the Sun, its tail grew longer, more active, and more visible. Sky at Night magazine, +1. The green glow became more pronounced, not just the normal cometary green due to C2 emission, but also from species atypical for comets, given weak C2 signals. Signs alert. Its coma expanded dust and volatiles streaming outward. But in parallel, governments and space agencies quietly increased surveillance. Satellites were retasked. Planetary defense divisions ran simulation. Memos leaked of draft plans for interception or deflection. Though no public confirmation came, disinformation and secrecy became the default. Some in the scientific community argued that the 9 companions, if real, might be dormant probes, activated only by certain solar thresholds. Perhaps they were invisible until they received intense sunlight or passed a certain distance from the sun or a particular magnetic region. That could explain why they blinked into existence at the same moment that conditions changed. But here's the key. In real observations to date, no confirmed evidence supports multiple bodies orbiting with Atlas. No published spectral lines or images have definitively separated companions. No independent teams have duplicated the 9-object claim. It remains a speculative scenario, dramatic, thrilling, but unverified. The scientific consensus still treats Atlas as one object with complex behavior, not a fleet. Still, the growing anomalies, CO2 dominance, distant water activity, polarization oddities push the envelope of typical comet models. Some planetary scientists now describe 3I divided by Atlas as possibly a new class of interstellar object, bridging comets and planetesimals from alien systems. Northeastern Global News, +2, Psi, News, Breaking Science, News, +2. In your scenario, the revelation of 9 powered escorts expands the tension dramatically. It forces us to confront: are we observing nature beyond our models, or something engineered beyond our comprehension? As October drew near, Atlas' path and activity became the centerpiece of global observation. Its perihelion is expected around the 29th of October 2025. Planetary Society, +3. Wikipedia, +3. IFL Science, +3. By then, it will be deeply heated, more volatile, and its tail more dramatic. It will pass near Mars around October 3, a recent flyby that European orbiters already captured. AP News, +1. Between now and then, 2 paths lie ahead. Either the escorts are confirmed rewriting everything, or they remain hidden and the anomalies remain a cosmic riddle. In both cases, the world holds its breath. When the world first heard that 9 objects might be escorting 3I Atlas, most people dismissed it as another space internet rumor. But then came the signals. Tiny pulses repeating. Regular, uncomfortably perfect. At first, it was just background noise. A rhythmic spike buried inside ordinary cosmic static. 1 peak every 43 seconds, too faint to stand out from the solar hiss. But as Atlas drew closer, the pulse grew stronger, as if distance mattered to it. Radio dishes in South America, Spain, Japan, and Australia all caught the same faint beat. The pattern wasn't random. It was harmonic, like a musical note slowly tuning itself. NASA's Deep Space Network logged it quietly in early October 2025 under the tag Anomalous Telemetry. Source near 3, I divided by Atlas. No public statement, just classification. Astronomers describe magnetism as a kind of skeleton that holds the solar system together invisible but everywhere. When that skeleton starts to vibrate, you notice magnetometers from the European swarm satellites began recording synchronized fluctuations in Earth's field, matching the same 43-second rhythm. The effect was minuscule, barely 1/100th of what a lightning strike produces, yet too clean to be natural noise. On October 2nd, observers in Chile and Canary Islands noticed something else. The green glow of Atlas and its companions was no longer uniform. Each escort now flickered in sequence, one after another, a wave of light passing around the formation like a pulse circling a heartbeat. The pattern was mathematical. 9 pulses, pause, 9 again. Every cycle took exactly 6 minutes and 27 seconds, a ratio that coincidentally matches the rotation frequency of Earth's core field modulation. Coincidence, maybe. But coincidence has a habit of feeling intentional when it happens in rhythm. By October 3rd, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the European Trace Gas Orbiter snapped frames of Atlas sweeping past the Martian orbit. To the public eye, it was a harmless smudge of light. To engineers in Houston and Darmstadt, it was a convoy moving as if under command. Then came the burst. A single beam of microwave energy, narrow, focused, lasting less than half a second, directed not at Earth but at the Moon. The signal hit a region known as Mare Imbrium, home to dense gravitational anomalies called mascons. Lunar orbiters registered the flash. Then, for a moment, the Moon echoed back a low-frequency rumble picked up by Earth-based arrays. The pattern of the echo mirrored the original 43-second pulse, as if something beneath the Moon's surface had answered. Within hours, reports circulated that seismic monitors in Antarctica, India, and South America detected micro-vibrations matching the same timing. Whales in the Pacific changed migration route. Pigeons over Europe flew in erratic circles. Navigation systems briefly glitched without clear explanation. It could all be coincidence, scientists said, yet the patterns fit too neatly into the timeline of the convoy. The news didn't reach mainstream outlets immediately, but independent astronomers and citizen scientists began posting waveform comparisons online, aligning the pulses from space, Earth, and Moon. The curves matched almost perfectly. Someone called it the solar system's heartbeat. The name stuck. By October 5th, private companies like SpaceX and Rocket Lab had quietly received inquiries from government agencies about rapid deployment of instrument satellites. No official contracts, just questions. How soon? How far? How close could you get to Atlas? Inside NASA, a small team of data engineers noticed that some of the pole's harmonics matched a specific mathematical constant, the golden ratio, 1.618. Every 9th burst showed frequency spacing proportional to that ratio. To a mathematician, it looked like compression efficiency. To a philosopher, it looked like design. The more telescopes looked, the less they understood. High-resolution spectra showed the companions weren't simply glowing, they were modulating light, flickering between visible and infrared bands in a pattern suspiciously like data encoding. No random dust cloud behaves that way. Some scientists suggested It could be outgassing jets spinning in unison, a natural but rare phenomenon, yet the mathematical precision made others uneasy. If nature was responsible, then nature was speaking fluent code. In those weeks of October 2025, as the world prepared for Atlas's perihelion on the 29th, the story split into two realities. The official one measured, cautious, grounded in spectra and chemistry, and the other whispered in forums, late-night podcasts, and hidden subthreads across the internet. The one that believed the convoy was alive. Amateur observers tracked the formation each night and swore it changed shape, sometimes a triangle, sometimes a line, sometimes a ring. Each configuration seemed to match solar magnetic field maps published by ESA's solar orbiter days before. How would random objects know where those field lines lay? That was the question no one could answer. In Washington, D.C., London, Beijing, and Moscow, closed-door meetings were held daily. Contingency documents surfaced online mentioning Contact Protocol Phase 1 and Lunar Muscon Response. Most were immediately denied as hoaxes, but the language was too technical to dismiss completely. For ordinary people, life continued unchanged. Traffic, work, sleep, routine, while above them a formation of 10 bodies carved through space in silence. The green glow brightened every night, visible now through amateur telescopes. Children in rural areas asked why a new star was blinking in the sky. Parents had no answer. Meanwhile, in data centers across the world, supercomputers tried to model the energy signatures of the escorts. Every simulation failed. No combination of known physics could contain that much power in something so small. It was as if the universe had borrowed the laws of another one to make it possible. And for the first time in years, scientists stopped arguing over who was right. They all agreed on one thing. Whatever was coming with 3i Atlas was unlike anything they had ever seen. When the beam toward the moon fired again on October 10th, it was stronger. This time, radio arrays across Earth recorded it simultaneously. The signal split into two frequencies, both encoded with what looked like binary ratios of pi and phi 3.141 and 1.618. It lasted exactly 2.2 seconds, then silence. That 2.2 number rang a bell for historians, the same cycle of roughly 2,200 years that ancient records claimed green-tailed objects visited Earth. Coincidence again? Or message? No one knows. Not yet. The night after the second beam, seismographs around the moon's far side recorded a tremor lasting 4 minutes. NASA publicly called it thermal expansion crack, but unofficial audio released by an insider sounded different, a rhythmic series of knocks, faint but structured, like someone tapping from inside. Now, as October slides toward its end, and 3i Atlas nears perihelion, one question hangs over every night sky. What happens when it meets the sun? Will it burn and shatter like comets before it, or will it do something else, something no one is ready for? Because if the patterns, the signals, and the mathematics are not coincidences, then the convoy is not random. It is performing a sequence. And somewhere in that sequence, the next step is us. By the second week of October 2025, the world had quietly entered a new phase. The story of Three-Eye Atlas and the 9 mysterious companions no longer lived only in scientific circles. It was whispered across radio stations, classrooms, live streams, and late-night news. Even those who never looked up before began scanning the sky for a faint green glow that wasn't supposed to be there. And yet, in the offices of the world's most powerful agencies, silence reigned. NASA's public live streams of Atlas stopped updating. ESA's solar orbiter feeds were quietly delayed. China's space tracking network went offline for routine maintenance. But in private, something far more urgent was unfolding. The first signs came from Earth's ionosphere. On October 11th, scientists at the HAARP research station in Alaska noticed a repeating fluctuation in the upper atmosphere, a faint rise in electron density every 43 seconds. At first, they thought it was coincidence, but it matched the same rhythm as the signal pattern recorded from the escorts of Atlas. The same one the moon seemed to echo. Soon, other observatories confirmed it. The pulse wasn't isolated. It was everywhere, rippling invisibly through the magnetic shell surrounding Earth like waves in a pond. What made it stranger was its timing. Each pulse aligned precisely with the moments the James Webb Space Telescope captured new outbursts of energy near Atlas. Almost as if every surge of brightness out there was triggering a heartbeat down here. In the early morning hours of October 12th, the Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded an unusual event. A narrow thread-like filament of plasma stretching from the sun's surface straight along the trajectory of Three-Eye Atlas. At first, astronomers thought it was coincidence. But as Atlas passed through that corridor, its green coma intensified dramatically, as though the object had absorbed energy rather than being burned by it. Solar physicists were left speechless. Every known comet grows brighter near the sun because it heats up. That's normal. But none have ever shown signs of energy absorption. The data hinted at something else, a feedback loop, where light wasn't just reflecting off dust and gas, but being redirected inward. Meanwhile, across the world, unexplained radio disturbances started appearing in civilian frequencies. Shortwave bands flickered. GPS systems momentarily lost synchronization. And then, once again, the 43-second pulse. Every time, like a whisper, regular, intentional, persistent. Even when the signals were too faint to detect by instruments, they seemed to be felt. Some people reported an odd sense of pressure, not pain, not sound, just an awareness, as though something deep within the earth was breathing in rhythm with space itself. Psychologists called it suggestion. Scientists called it interference. But no one could explain how millions of people from different continents began reporting the same sensation. A strange tug every time Atlas pulsed. By mid-October, the official space agencies were no longer working alone. Private space companies were drawn into the quiet coordination. SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Arianespace. They received requests to prepare high-lift payloads for emergency deployment, though none were told the true reason. At the same time, the US Space Force, European Space Command, and CNSA began running 24-hour monitoring shifts. Their task was simple: track any deviation in Atlas's orbit, anything that might hint it was adjusting course. But here's the part that baffled everyone. It wasn't deviating. It wasn't slowing down, speeding up, or wobbling. Instead, it was stabilizing, as though guided by invisible rails cutting through the solar system. How could an interstellar object maintain such precision? Even our most advanced spacecraft drift slightly from solar radiation pressure. Atlas did not. It flew with the confidence of something that knew exactly where it was going. Scientists in Japan noticed another peculiarity. Their space weather satellites recorded that the solar wind density near the asteroid belt had begun fluctuating in regular waves, as if invisible barriers were forming and collapsing every few hours. Each fluctuation matched the same magnetic timing coming from Earth and the Moon. It was as if the entire solar system, planetary fields, magnetic waves, atmospheric densities, was humming to the same silent metronome. When the European Space Agency finally released a short press statement, it was painfully brief. We are currently observing heightened electromagnetic activity associated with interplanetary bodies. These variations are under study. There is no indication of threat at this time. But behind that calm language, researchers were panicking. The instruments were overloading. Sensitive spectrometers began showing interference they couldn't filter out. The Webb telescope's infrared arrays temporarily desaturated, as though bombarded by a pattern of light that wasn't background radiation but directed. One astrophysicist privately described it like this: "It's as if something out there knows we're looking at it, and it's looking back." Meanwhile, amateur astronomers, unfiltered by official channels, began capturing something extraordinary. During a rare gap between solar glare and twilight, several observers reported that the 9 escorts were now moving slightly ahead of Atlas, spreading into a wide V-shaped formation, their green glows forming a symmetrical arc across the void. And then, on October 14th, they shifted again. For a brief 2 minutes, the formation rotated, a synchronized turn that even the best orbital mechanics couldn't justify under pure gravity. To the naked eye, it looked almost like a fleet repositioning itself. Governments still refused to confirm or deny, yet leaked data showed that world militaries had gone on quiet alert. Not public mobilization, but readiness. Satellites in low orbit were retasked, and radar arrays from Alaska to Siberia to Argentina began scanning the skies every few seconds instead of minutes. And in the middle of it all, 3I Atlas continued its silent voyage, calm, bright, and unbothered by the chaos it caused below. Its coma now stretched over 1 million kilometers, its green glow illuminating the solar wind like mist around a lantern. The tail, once faint, had split into 2, a narrow filament of plasma and a thicker dust arc curling behind it like a luminous scar. The 9 companions followed, each faintly pulsing, each perfectly aligned. Together, they looked less like random space debris and more like a convoy moving with purpose. By October 16th, the pulses changed again. Not stronger, just faster. 43 seconds became 41, then 40, the rhythm tightening, as if counting down to something. That's when radio telescopes picked up a new signature. Not just the harmonic pulse, but modulations riding on top of it. Short, compressed packets, bits of encoded data. When scientists translated them into visual graphs, they didn't see random noise. They saw geometry, triangles, spirals, and patterns resembling magnetic field lines, but too symmetrical, too mathematical, almost like instructions. Every major observatory in the world is now watching 3i Atlas. But for all the data collected, terabytes of numbers, spectra, graphs, light curves, no one can explain what's really happening. It's not just physics anymore, it's choreography. A cosmic dance too precise to be an accident. And the closer Atlas moves toward the sun, the more the rhythm of that dance seeps into everything around us. Our atmosphere, our magnetic field, our very heartbeat. In the next few days, Atlas will cross the invisible line where sunlight becomes a furnace, and what happens then may define everything we think we know about space. But before it does, something tells the world to hold its breath. Because whatever this convoy is doing, it's almost ready for the next phase. By the time the world reached the third week of October 2025, 3i Atlas was no longer just a mystery. It had become a countdown. Every telescope on Earth, from NASA's Webb to private backyard scopes, was now locked on its green glow. And yet, no two observers saw the same thing. For some, Atlas appeared calm, almost beautiful, a comet drifting serenely through the inner solar system. For others, its light seemed alive, pulsing, shifting, changing hues from green to blue to white, like a living heartbeat written across the stars. Whatever it was approaching something critical. On October 17th, a peculiar signal reached Earth. It came through NASA's Deep Space Network, bouncing off relay satellites that weren't even pointed in the direction of Atlas. It was a frequency shift, barely measurable, but timed exactly with the next pulse from the convoy. The engineers double-checked the telemetry. Nothing in the network should have been affected. No solar flare, no cosmic ray burst, nothing. But the pattern kept repeating. A subtle, deliberate phase drift in the DSN's internal clock every time Atlas pulsed. It was as if something out there was synchronizing with our systems, correcting them, aligning them, teaching our machines to beat in time with the cosmos. Inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a quiet meeting took place. The question wasn't, what is it, anymore? It was, what happens when it reaches perihelion? The closest approach the point where 3i Atlas would pass behind the sun from our view was only days away. A total blackout period. A window when not even the most powerful instruments could see it. For 3 days, the convoy would be invisible. And that, according to every model, was when it would be closest to Earth's orbit on its outbound path. At the same time, the ESA Solar Orbiter captured the most detailed image yet of the convoy's formation. The escorts were no longer behind Atlas. They had spread out, forming a vast, symmetrical pattern. a structure that spanned nearly 2 million kilometers. To the untrained eye, it looked random, but when scientists overlaid it with magnetic field maps from the solar wind, they found an exact correlation. Each escort occupied a point of magnetic equilibrium, as if deliberately arranged along invisible lines of force. It was the kind of precision that nature could imitate, but only technology could maintain. Meanwhile, on Earth, new anomalies emerged. Every 24 hours, exactly at 2 a.m. UTC, the geomagnetic field spiked, a faint, repeating surge that mirrored the timing of the first sighting in Chile weeks ago. The same moment when those 9 faint lights appeared around Atlas for the first time. Some called it coincidence, others saw it as memory, as if the universe itself was replaying the moment the convoy revealed itself. October 18th brought another phenomenon, a luminous spiral seen briefly over the Pacific Ocean. It resembled the kind of spirals left behind by rocket exhausts at high altitude, but every space agency denied launches that night. The spiral center pointed toward the direction of Atlas's trajectory. Within hours, a second spiral appeared, this time over Norway. Captured by hundreds of cameras, its rotation matching the same 43-second rhythm that haunted scientists for weeks. The internet exploded. For the first time, the convoy was no longer a secret. People everywhere began to notice the strange green light in the sky, the steady pulse that could be timed like a clock. It wasn't imagination anymore. It was visible. Governments went silent. NASA issued one statement, only 23 words long. 3I Atlas continues its natural progression toward perihelion. No evidence suggests anomalous or artificial activity. But deep within NASA's encrypted servers, data from the Parker Solar Probe told another story. As the probe flew through the same magnetic corridor Atlas was traveling through, its sensors picked up localized magnetic reversals, brief flips in polarity, as though the solar wind itself was being folded and twisted by something massive and organized. For 3 minutes, Parker recorded a perfectly repeating wave pattern. Then, abruptly, all instruments reset. A system reboot triggered by an external electromagnetic pulse. No one could explain it. When the probe came back online, its orientation had shifted by 0.03 degrees, an almost imperceptible turn. But in deep space, nothing moves without reason. At the same moment, the James Webb Telescope picked up something unexpected. Infrared flashes that appear to form geometric alignments, like a constellation being drawn in real time across the void. 9 flashes. Pause. 9 more. When overlaid on a solar coordinate grid, the pattern formed a shape eerily close to the flower of life, a structure that mathematically contains the blueprint of every platonic solid. In other words, geometry fundamental to creation itself. Coincidence? Maybe, but the pattern was real, and it was coming from the convoy. On October 20th, a tremor shook the lunar surface again, small, rhythmic, but structured. This time, it lasted 6 minutes, each pulse exactly 43 seconds apart, then silent. When analyzed, the vibrations formed a waveform nearly identical to the energy pulses emitted by Atlas and its companions. It was as if the moon had become a mirror, not reflecting light, but transmitting resonance. Somewhere in those frequencies, hidden among harmonics and magnetic echoes, scientists discovered something that made them uneasy. Buried within the 43-second pulse was a secondary tone, a higher frequency repeating every 7.83 seconds. That number wasn't random. It's the exact frequency of Earth's Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of our planet. The implication was chilling. Whatever the convoy was doing, it was now synchronized with both the Moon and Earth. By October 21st, the final alignment began. From our perspective, Atlas and its companions were now sliding behind the Sunday. Telescopes went blind. Only the solar probes could still track, and even then, barely. Every reading, every instrument started to show rhythmic surges that aligned across multiple platforms. The sun's corona flickered like a pulse of green fire. Solar wind data showed a steady pattern of compression waves, and then, for 11 full minutes, the entire electromagnetic background of the inner solar system flattened. No solar flares, no noise, just silence. A silence so complete that it broke every predictive model we've ever built. For that 11 minutes, the solar system's heartbeat stopped. When the signal returned, the 9 escorts were gone. Every instrument showed only one object, 3-eye Atlas, now dimmer, smaller, and strangely hollow. Had they merged? Had they separated beyond detection? No one knew, but the countdown had reached 0. And the real question was no longer where the 9 went, but what they left behind. When the escorts vanished behind the sun, the world didn't notice right away. There was no explosion, no flare, no visible drama, just silence. For 11 long minutes, the solar system's electromagnetic hum flattened into a stillness so absolute that instruments designed to record chaos began outputting perfect zeros. To most, it meant nothing, but to those watching the data, it was like hearing the universe hold its breath. And then it exhaled. At 2 a.m. UTC on October 22nd, the moment Earth rotated into direct alignment with the Sun Atlas vector, the silence broke. The 43-second pulse returned, but now it was stronger, cleaner, and layered. This time, the signal didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere, from the solar wind, from the magnetosphere, even faintly from the Earth itself. The entire inner system had become a resonant chamber. When NASA's Parker Solar Probe came back online, its instruments recorded something no one expected: a massive drop in particle velocity. As if the solar wind had hit an invisible barrier, the probe's magnetometer showed brief reversal spikes, tiny ripples in polarity, moving outward from the sun like concentric waves. Each wave matched the exact rhythm of the Atlas pulse, and within those waves, a strange oscillation, oscillating between 7.83 Hz and 8.01 Hz, a narrow band that just happened to overlap perfectly with Earth's Schumann resonance. That meant one thing. Whatever the convoy had done behind the sun, it had tuned the entire solar wind into the same natural frequency as our planet. For the first time in history, The Earth's magnetic shell was resonating in harmony with space itself. Back on Earth, the effects began subtly. Radio operators noticed temporary clarity in bands usually drowned in noise. Long-distance signals, normally distorted by the ionosphere, now traveled cleanly across continents. Ham radio enthusiasts called it the quiet window. But scientists at CERN and Fermilab reported something different. Their particle accelerators began to detect random deviations, tiny shifts in decay, timing, and quantum spin alignment, as if reality itself was vibrating out of phase for fractions of a second. One physicist described it as like watching the rules of the universe breathe. The next morning, astronomers expected to reacquire Atlas once it emerged from behind the sundae. But when the telescopes pointed to its calculated position, nothing was there. No light, no tail, no reflection, only empty space. Every instrument confirmed it. The main body of 3I Atlas had disappeared. At first, they thought it had fragmented, vaporized by solar radiation. But if it had, there would have been a debris field, dust trails, solar scattering, anything. There was nothing. The object hadn't burned. It had simply ceased to exist. Within 24 hours, the magnetic pulse returned again, this time weaker. But its source no longer matched Atlas's previous coordinates. Instead, it originated from between Earth and Mars, an area of empty space that should have been silent. Astronomers quickly pointed telescopes toward that region. For several hours, they saw nothing. Then, faintly, a new glow emerged, a diffuse, translucent structure shaped like a ring. It wasn't solid, wasn't matter as we know it, but a lattice of charged particles forming an enormous circular formation roughly 5 million kilometers wide. To the untrained eye, it looked like a ghostly halo. To astrophysicists, it looked like a construct. NASA described it as a temporary plasma anomaly. ESA called it a transient magnetic arc. But leaked documents from the European Space Command labeled it differently. Artificial resonance structure, type unknown. The term artificial sparked chaos behind the scenes. For decades, scientists have debated whether structures could be built from electromagnetic fields rather than solid matter. Stable plasma rings held in place by resonance frequencies. It was theory until now. The new formation, now dubbed the Halo of Atlas, matched the energy output of all 9 escorts combined, multiplied by 10. Whatever had happened behind the sun had transformed their energy into a colossal magnetic architecture floating between 2 worlds. As the ring stabilized, Earth's magnetic field began to fluctuate. Compass readings drifted by several degrees. Auroras appeared at the equator faint, emerald curtains visible even in tropical skies. Instruments at the South Atlantic anomaly, a region already weak in magnetism, spiked off the charts. The anomaly widened by nearly 200 kilometers in just 12 hours. And then came the noise. On October 24th, ground-based seismographs across the planet recorded faint rhythmic vibrations. Not earthquakes, frequencies too high, too steady, too global. Every continent, every ocean, one synchronized tremor repeating every 43 seconds. The same pulse, still there. still counting. It was as if the entire Earth had been integrated into the pattern. The heartbeat of the convoy had become our own. Scientists struggled to understand it. They tried filtering, analyzing, modeling, but the signal defied logic. When converted into audio, the waveform produced a haunting hum, a tone that seemed to shimmer between low and high pitches, as if two notes were playing at once, slightly out of phase. People who listened to it described feeling dizzy. Some said calm. Others said they felt watched. Online communities called it the Atlas frequency. Within a week, millions of people were tuning in to live streams of the sound, claiming it soothed anxiety, helped sleep, or sparked lucid dreams. Psychologists called it mass suggestion, but neurologists noticed something strange. Patients listening to the signal during sleep showed higher than normal alpha wave coherence, a brain pattern usually seen in deep meditation. Whatever was broadcasting out there, it was changing us. In the background, planetary defense agencies around the world entered condition amber, a quiet state of readiness that the public never heard about. Satellites were repositioned. Lunar probes reactivated dormant antennae. Even the Artemis 3 mission, scheduled for launch, was delayed indefinitely. In confidential memos, scientists debated whether the ring-like halo was transmitting or receiving. Was it calling something or listening for a reply? At the same time, radio telescopes in Chile picked up a second signal overlapping the Atlas frequency. This one was shorter, a simple 3-pulse pattern repeating every 2 hours. When decoded into binary, it produced a sequence too precise to be random, 101101. 6 bits, meaningless at first glance, but when rearranged into coordinates, they pointed directly to the center of the newly formed ring. Someone or something had left a signature. Then, in the early hours of October 25th, the ring flickered. For 20 minutes, it pulsed brighter, its green hue deepening into blue, until it resembled a giant eye watching silently from the void. And then it stopped pulsing altogether. It remained perfectly still. Astronomers expected it to dissipate. Instead, it stabilized into a cold, faintly luminous disk, motionless, unchanging, like a mirror left hanging in space. The official reports now say that the anomaly between Earth and Mars is under observation. Privately, however, sources admit they no longer detect it through normal light. The ring is now visible only through magnetometric imaging, as if it had shifted just beyond the visible spectrum, still there, but phased slightly out of reality. Some scientists believe it's a kind of dimensional boundary, a byproduct of interstellar plasma resonance. Others quietly call it what they fear it might be, a gate. Whatever it is, it has changed the solar system forever. Every magnetic compass, every aurora, every whisper of radiation now carries its fingerprint. And deep inside that ring of silence, something faint is beginning to shimmer again. Not light, not energy. A pattern, a pulse. Slower this time, 43 seconds. 45, 47. As if it's breathing. By late October 2025, The world had run out of explanations. 3-Eye Atlas had vanished. The 9 companions had dissolved into silence, and yet the sky would not stop speaking. That ring, that vast, shimmering halo suspended between Earth and Mars, had gone invisible to the eye, but not to the instruments. Every hour it emitted a new rhythm, slower, heavier, almost aware. What began as a comet had become a mirror, and now the mirror was starting to look back. At 2 a.m. UTC on October 27, the pulse shifted again, its tone no longer uniform. It began to modulate, forming wave clusters that carried information density far beyond any natural resonance. Mathematicians at MIT and CERN ran Fourier analyses and found embedded harmonics matching prime numbers up to 31, a universal signature for intelligent sequencing. In simple words, it was speaking in mathematics. Across observatories, the same realization spread like a chill. Whatever was transmitting from the halo wasn't random. It was constructed. It had structure, intention, pattern, and timing. And, impossibly, it was accelerating. For the first time since the discovery, the moon began to respond. Lunar seismographs detected a repeating tremor that perfectly counterphased the halo's pulses, like a mirror echo balancing a conversation. Every 43 seconds from the halo, a 43-second delay, then a faint reply from the moon. The two signals intertwined like voices in a whisper that spanned millions of kilometers. In those oscillations, analysts detected carrier waves encoded with ratios of pi 3.141, 1.618, the same constants that build galaxies, atoms, and life itself. NASA finally broke silence. A closed-door press conference leaked hours later. One scientist, audibly shaken, said, "If these ratios are intentional, we are witnessing communication in the fundamental language of the universe, geometry." The following day, the James Webb Space Telescope pointed once more toward the halo. Infrared mapping revealed faint arcs forming on its edges, 9 arcs, arranged in a perfect circle. 9. The number of the missing escorts, but these weren't objects anymore. They were gateways of light, each radiating alternating wavelengths, red, blue, white, cycling every 43 seconds in perfect synchrony. Together they formed a rotating pattern, a colossal, deliberate mechanism awakening in silence. At the same time, strange effects began sweeping across Earth. Magnetometers failed. Compasses spun aimlessly. Animals migrated in circles. The Schumann resonance doubled, then tripled, reaching frequencies no instrument had ever recorded. In South America, the sky flickered green and blue. In Africa, auroras shimmered across deserts that had never seen such light. And in cities across the world, millions of people claimed to hear a low hum at the edge of perception, a sound they described not with their ears, but their bones. Hospitals reported a surge in insomnia. Some said they dreamed of lights spiraling inward, of patterns written across the void, of an eye vast and glowing, staring back through space. Everywhere, consciousness itself seemed to lean toward something. Then came the alignment. The 29th of October 20, 25. The day of Atlas's predicted perihelion. The moment it should have burned, vaporized, ended. Instead, the sun dimmed, not in brightness, but in rhythm. For exactly 11 minutes, the same interval recorded during the convoy's disappearance. Solar output flattened, solar flares ceased, radiation levels steadied. It was as though the sun's heartbeat had been taken into synchronization with the halo. When it resumed, something impossible happened. A new burst of light erupted from the center of the ring, a vertical beam, narrow and brilliant, stretching millions of kilometers toward the Sunday. Spectral analysis showed no known element. Its wavelength existed between gamma and ultraviolet, a forbidden zone of physics. Every satellite, every probe, every camera went white. For 43 seconds, the solar system glowed with a color no human language can describe. When vision returned, the halo had changed. It was no longer a ring. It was a sphere, a luminous globe surrounding the region where Atlas once traveled, its surface rippling like liquid glass. Inside, something moved. Webb's infrared detectors captured a faint lattice of geometry rotating within, interlocking hexagons and spirals like an engine made of light. Each rotation aligned perfectly with gravitational nodes between Earth and Mars, points known as Lagrange 1 and 2. The object, if it could still be called that, was stabilizing itself using gravity wells. It was anchoring. Within minutes, every magnetometer on Earth spiked to record highs. The northern lights bled into the equator. Power grids flickered. Radio channels filled with coherent tones. And, across every frequency band, the same numerical sequence appeared again and again. 101101. 6 digits. The same binary pattern that first pointed to the halo's center, except now the intervals between pulses had changed. No longer 43 seconds, now 22. Half the time, twice the speed, a doubling as if a second phase had begun. In Geneva, CERN's control room lights flickered as particle collisions spiked spontaneously, protons bending toward invisible magnetic fields. In California, gravitational wave detectors LIGO and Virgo registered tiny space-time ripples, not from black holes, but from within the solar system. Their coordinates? Exactly the center of the halo. The amplitude was small, but precise. A repeating sinusoidal wave echoing the Atlas frequency, reverberating across space-time itself. If it was technology, it was rewriting the laws of relativity. If it was nature, it was evolving before our eyes. Inside the sphere, 9 points ignited simultaneously. They flared like stars, small, bright, perfectly synchronized. Then each projected a filament of light inward, converging on a single core at the center. A 10th light bloomed, vast, radiant, eclipsing the rest. For a brief moment, every sensor across Earth, every satellite, every telescope, every radio dish recorded a uniform spike, not a signal, a single value, 1. Unity. Perfect coherence. Every field, every particle, every frequency aligned for a fraction of a second. Then, a whisper not sound, but modulation, translated by AI spectrograms into the simplest possible human phrase. We are here. The message lasted half a second. Then the signal cut. The halo collapsed inward like a closing iris, its light folding until it became a single point, a pinhole of pure white hanging in the dark. It pulsed once more, a final 43-second beat, and vanished. No explosion, no trace, no debris, just empty space where something vast had stood. For hours afterward, the instruments of the world hummed with residual resonance, low, soft, rhythmic, fading only as dawn rose across the planet. And when the skies cleared, a new star was visible just above the horizon at dawn, dim, pale blue, hovering exactly where the halo had been. Astronomers rushed to catalogue it, but it didn't fit any spectrum known. It wasn't reflection, or comet, or plasma. It was something else. Steady, constant, deliberate. They named it Echo Star. Days later, NASA released a short statement. Anomalous electromagnetic resonance observed near Earth-Mars orbit has dissipated. No debris detected. Normal solar activity resumed. But inside encrypted channels, scientists shared the unfiltered data, the ones that contained the phrase, the one that no one could explain. We are here. And as weeks passed, that faint blue light remained in the morning sky, silent, distant, patient, sometimes pulsing, always watching. To this day, no official record admits what happened during those 11 minutes of silence behind the sun, when the solar system's heartbeat stopped and restarted in harmony. But deep down, everyone who witnessed it, from the engineers at NASA to the stargazers in their backyards, felt the same quiet truth. The universe had answered, and it hadn't whispered. It had sung. The world never went back to normal after that night. It didn't have to. When the halo vanished and the Echo Star appeared, humanity felt something it hadn't felt in centuries. A quiet knowing that we are no longer alone. Not proof, just presence. For weeks after the event, telescopes kept searching for debris, for residual energy, for any trace of the fleet that once cut through our solar system. There was nothing to find. Space was still. Yet, something inside that stillness had changed. At dawn, people everywhere began to look up. In the deserts of Chile, in the streets of Lagos, in the fields of China and the mountains of Norway, they saw the same faint blue shimmer near the morning sunday. Children pointed, pilots logged it. Even satellites caught its reflection. It didn't move like a comet or twinkle like a star. It simply was. Astronomers named it Echo Star, but among the public, it was called something else. The Eye of Atlas. Every 43 seconds, its light pulsed, soft, steady, almost like a reminder. Months passed. The storms of speculation calmed. Governments denied everything, of course. Official reports called the event solar interference. But quietly, new departments were formed, new sensors were launched, and every major space agency kept a telescope trained on that single blue point. No one wanted to admit it, but every reading confirmed the same thing. The pulse was still there, and its timing was synchronized to the Schumann resonance of Earth. In other words, it was still connected to us. Scientists started calling it the resonance phenomenon. Some said it was nothing more than the after-image of a cosmic event, like ripples on water after a stone disappears. Others believed it was a stabilizing field, something placed there, waiting, dormant, until we were ready to understand. But there were also those who whispered another theory, that what we saw wasn't a visitor at all. It was an awakening, that the solar system itself had reached a phase of resonance with the rest of the galaxy, a heartbeat aligning with the greater cosmic rhythm. If true, then 3I Atlas was never just a comet. It was a tuning fork, striking the first note in a symphony we've only begun to hear. Even now, every so often, the echo star brightens for a moment, just slightly, as if testing the silence, as if checking to see if we're still listening. And every time it does, the magnetometers hum, the auroras shimmer a little brighter, and the world falls quiet again. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's communication. Maybe it's a mirror reflecting our own curiosity back at us. But one truth remains undeniable. The universe is not silent. It never was. We just weren't listening closely enough. And so, the story of 3I Atlas doesn't end with destruction, or invasion, or fear. It ends with understanding that among the endless stars, our little blue world was noticed. For a few moments in time, the cosmos reached out its hand, and the heartbeat of our planet answered back. The message was simple, so simple that it took us the longest time to believe it. We are here. Maybe we was them, maybe it was us, maybe it was both. But as long as that faint blue shimmer remains in the sky, as long as it keeps pulsing every 43 seconds, there's a reason to keep watching. Because somewhere out there, the story isn't over. It's only waiting for its next chapter. If you've made it this far, you already know our universe hides more than it reveals. So keep your eyes on the sky. Watch for the pulse. And if you want to know what happens next when that light brightens again, click the next story appearing on your screen now. Don't look away. Subscribe, stay curious, and keep listening, because the silence between stars is starting to sound like music.